a good way to start it, because at some point, and you can write this down if you'd like, it's a little Monday afternoon wisdom. You either do it or you don't. We can gnash our teeth, we can agonize, we can analyze, we can lament. But sooner or later, for any team in any sport, when it comes to the last 2 or 3 minutes of a ball game, you either make the plays or you don't. Minnesota Timberwolves continue to be on a path that seems almost, it's borderline inexplicable.
What do you mean?
Even with the changes, the trade, the injuries, if the game is close, we find a way to lose it. Now, you can argue that last night there were enough mitigating circumstances. It was competitive. It was hard fought. A lot of body blows were exchanged. We gave as good as we absorbed. But in the end, guess what? They hit 2 more shots. When we took those same shots, they went in and out. We can't close. We can't finish. And again, maybe you want to lean on the fact that we're down several starters. But throughout this season, we have not been particularly good at closing games. In fact, the stat I read over the weekend that got my attention was that in so-called clutch games, and I assume there's a working definition of what a clutch game is.
Yep.
If it's 2-possession game in the last minute, I don't know what, but I think we all can recognize it.
There's a number associated with it.
The only teams that have been worse at so-called Magic Johnson winning time. Back in the day, that's what he called it, winning time. You got a pen? Because you're going to want this list.
I'm writing it down.
These are the only teams worse than us at winning time or in winning time. The Charlotte Hornets.
Okay.
The New Orleans Pelicans. The Toronto Raptors. The Washington Wizards, and the Utah Jazz. Or is it the Utah basketball team? No, that's the hockey team.
It's the hockey team for now,
It's still the Jazz, right?
Yes, they are.
So
the bottom 3 teams in the Eastern Conference and the bottom 2 teams in the Western Conference right now.
Awful. Awful, awful, awful. That's what those teams have in common. The Toronto Raptors are 18-39.
They beat us once.
They did, you're right. The Charlotte Hornets are 14-41. The Washington Wizards, who did beat us once, here are 9-47. Who else did I say? The Pels?
The Pels and the Jazz.
Pels are 14-43, and the Jazz are 14-42. You do the math on the number. I mean, this is... There's no mystery here. And I don't know what you think, because we haven't talked in a while. I thought you might miss that. But if it keeps happening as often as it's happening, it's not a mistake. It's not the refs. I don't think it's just injuries, although certainly injuries can reduce your margin for error. No, there's no question about that. But to me, it's got to be one of a couple of different things right now. But the biggest is, I think, flat out, there is too much responsibility in the hands of Anthony Edwards. And I know he's got to grow up at some point. He's not as young as he used to be. You want to be the superstar? That's part of the burden that you have to accept. But I think I do not think the Wolves are doing him any favors. And part of this is, again, personnel. He doesn't any longer have the closest thing to a number 2 that he did with Karl Anthony Towns a year ago. We know that. I know it feels like it's a broken record. Why lament it? Why keep bringing it up? Because it's not going to change. But I think he doesn't feel like he's got a partner in crime. Even though obviously Edwards is not a perimeter, I should say, Cat is not a perimeter player. he is still capable of, making plays and taking the pressure off in the last 2 minutes. Mike Conley has been at times ineffective, then he's been hurt, right? And so I think every game the head coach struggles with, is this a game I bring Conley back because of his wisdom and his experience and his cool, or is this a game where I can't afford to do that because I'm not getting enough out of him, or I'm getting something out of somebody else and I have to keep going there? The Anthony Edwards judgment is not good enough yet to have that much responsibility and to assume that he's going to make the right decisions. I'm maybe in the minority on this. I despise his shot selection on most nights. I do. I know he hits some of those setbacks, step back, threes, and I know he can make some shots where you go, well, you got to live with it because he's so good at it. But he's not balanced on a lot of these shots. They're not good shots. Watch, for example, compare and contrast the shooting approach and shooting styles and the balance between an Anthony Edwards and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander?
SGA.
Yeah. Now, I understand Johnny will immediately tell me, well, he's 4 years older and he's been around long. I get all that. But that's immaterial. Look how balanced he is. Look how measured he seems to be, and so willing, by the way. I don't know if he's going to be called on this yet, but he has a peculiar willingness to take mid-range jump shots. I'm surprised he hasn't gotten thrown out of the league yet. As it is, he's still supposed to be the leading MVP candidate, which surprises me. But I really believe that's what this team has to solve, whether it's, again, playing Conley more often, putting the ball back in his hands more, some other combination, whatever the case may be. But this ain't rocket science. And it was it 2 games ago? Which loss was it where Finchie brought this up after the game? And it might have been the Houston game, where he said, look, he makes a lot of great decisions and but that's we still got decision issues towards the end of games. We do. Other teams, part of the reason other teams in this conference are better than we are is they look more like they know what they want to do at the ends of games. It doesn't look like, and sometimes it's just you hit the shot or you miss it. I get that.
Yep.
But I really think that's the number one deal that ails this club right now is he's not ready for this. I don't care. We're all excited about the video where he's the truth, and we're happy for all of the verbal nonsense and gymnastics that take place in the NBA about whether this is the guy or that's the face of the league or whoever it is. I just don't think and I'm defending him to a degree because I'm saying I'm still not even sure that it's fair to him to expect that he's going to have that much basketball wisdom this early to make the right choices. I know his physical ability can sometimes render that moot, and he can just make something out of nothing, and you go, well, that didn't make any sense, but it went in, or that was a great drive to the basket. But I really think we're going to keep, no matter how healthy we get, I think we're going to keep pounding our head against the wall if we don't come up with a way where the ball is not constantly in his hands with 2 or 3 minutes to go. Go through the list of the number of breakdowns, turnovers, bad decisions, bad shots, forced shots, etc., that reduce the margin for error of a team that has played well enough again last night to win the ballgame.
Last night was a remarkable microcosm of the entire season. And the clutch thing, and Mike Breen, I was watching Breen. I was going back and forth between local and national last night because you're always curious what the national people are thinking. And Breen, the entire fourth quarter with Doris Burke is bringing up the clutch time
He's
stuff.
been fed the stats, yeah.
And as that's going on, if you're just parachuting in, what happened last night for the Wolves offensively is what seems to happen every single time this does happen. The ball is moving around. Guys are getting shots. Naz is playing well again. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is playing well again, hitting shots. The ball's popping. Conley's in there. They're getting it all over the place. And then with like 6 minutes to go, all of a sudden, it's like we're slowing down to pull into the train station. Mm-hmm. The brakes get put on. Anthony starts dribbling a million miles a minute. Here comes the double. Where's the ball going to go? Where SGA gets doubled, right? They talked about it last night. and he made some tough shots in the double. But you know what else they did, I thought, really well is they moved it even in the clutch time. He didn't take every shot last night.
He did not.
He didn't take every single contested shot. It wasn't just about SGA's shot making, because that's...
No, who's the guy they got from the Bulls, the good defensive stalwart? He had at least 3 3-pointers in the fourth quarter, didn't he?
Caruso.
And several of those, I want to say, were in winning time as well. At least one of those.
They were. And every piece there, and again, that might go down to supporting cast, because we've talked about it.
Yeah.
To me, what changed the game wasn't that SGA came in and started going nuts. And obviously, Jalen Clark getting injured, that's going to hurt, because he was absolutely helping carry them really the entire game. So that's a buzzkill. Clark's been playing great. But it's like the rest of the Wolves don't know what to do either. Like Jaden McDaniels is trying to take a shot over Chet. Like, what are you thinking? In the middle of the lane. Block, bucket the other way. Then he misses another 3. Go the other way. Like, they always know every other role player. When we were trapping them, and it's A1 Day 1, we're trapping them. They get it to something called Hartenstein, who's a nice player for them.
Yes,
he's hammering it on people, or
yes,
kicking it to the corner for a wide open 3-pointer. But the ball is still moving. SGA's initiating a lot of it, and it's obviously going to be in his. He's going to be option 1, but the second it's not there, like, it's gone, and everybody else knows what they're supposed to do. The Wolves all season long haven't known what to do with it. It's just a lot of dribbling and a tough ant shot. And he made some ridiculous shots again last night, but that is such a hard way to live. Yeah, well, again, was it the Houston game where through 3 quarters he was the dominant player, and then the fourth quarter he was awful? And stuff gets forced. And as you say, it's not like SGA never forces a shot, but he doesn't force a lot of them. He's also, though, he's got the ability that I don't know anybody else has the ability he has in one regard, to create space in the mid-range. Ant cannot create space the way that SGA does. He is so much more efficient of a player, and he is further along. I'm sure that's some of it, too. It's not even fair to compare Ant to that, because, as I said, I'm actually trying to give Ant the benefit of the doubt and to say, we're asking, even if you believe you should get more out of him, at some point, don't you have the evidence to say, well, this isn't working this way? We are asking too much of him at this point. We know how gifted he is and how strong mentally he is and how he wants it all. But that doesn't mean he's ready for it all. And I don't know if there's a plan B that you can figure out on the fly. We'll see. We putting $1,000 in somebody's hand? We are not. That'll be back in a few weeks.
Back in a few weeks. Okay, let's try to stay somewhat on schedule. I'll get to some texts that have come in, and I will give you the guest lineup, which will include a visit, Dateline Oklahoma City, from Jonny Athletic, who is tracking the Timberwolves. He is scheduled for 3:30. Jonny will be checking in with us from Okie City in just a couple of minutes. Nick Halter, Axios, will join at 4:30 with an interesting Wolves Arena proposal. And we have Ode to a Dead Guy before we're done. We have Ode to a Dead Gal before we are done as well. Let's squeeze in, while we're waiting for Jonny, a very quick...
This is the end. My only friend, the end.
Direct quote from your guy, Guardsy. Edward R. Martin, Jr., United States Attorney, District of Columbia. As President Trump's lawyers, we are proud to fight to protect his leadership as our president, and we are vigilant in standing against entities like the AP that refuse to put America first.
Where are we, America?
Thank God for community notes. This one notes, the DOJ is not the personal law firm of the president. The Attorney General represents the United States in legal matters generally and gives advice and opinions to the president and to the heads of the executive departments of the government when so requested. Who knew that we would be saluting on Elon Musk's Twitter a community note, reader's added context note? I don't know how long it'll stay up. I'm actually surprised it has stayed up as long as it has. But there you have it. A U.S. attorney really telling us all we need to know about how this country is being run and who it's being run for at this point. So that in effect, if you're the group who says, well, yeah, it's turnabout. Turnabout's fair play, right? Those U.S. attorneys used to be parrots for the Democrats. So you make your case by replacing them with attorneys who are parrots for the current president? God bless you. God bless America. And what did you do yesterday? You can't even answer the question, can you?
I can't, nor do I want to.
No, you probably don't want to.
Nor do I feel like I need to.
Remarkable.
I'll email it to you.
Please do. Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line is wide open if you have questions for Johnny K. Jonny Athletic, 64686. He is, I think his flight got a little bit delayed, and he was in an Uber, and he was going to try to force the beginning of the conversation on time in the Uber, but apparently it's a little loud in there. He didn't want to make a big issue with the driver.
I just figured I didn't want to put him in a tough position of having to ask the Uber driver to turn his music down.
That makes sense.
You don't need Johnny K in a compromised position. That's not good for anybody. I want him to be fast, play fast when he's with you.
651 guy, Jordan did not win until he was 27. Don't do this. Please stop doing this. Please. Please. Stop. Stop comparing. Stop it. It's not going to get you anywhere. It's not even fair to Anthony Edwards. He's not Michael Jordan. He will never be Michael Jordan. That doesn't mean he can't be one of the greatest players who ever lived. But go back and just watch, at whatever age you want, college, go back and watch footage of Michael Jordan, fundamentally speaking, from a balance standpoint, from a finishing standpoint. One of the great ironies about Anthony Edwards, despite his numbers, is he is not a great finisher. And statistically, he's not. So, again, don't. There's better ways to make whatever point you're trying to make. No one is, and the irony again here is people think I'm attacking Anthony Edwards. I'm actually doing the opposite. I'm trying to give Anthony Edwards a break and saying, you've got to stop pretending he's ready for all of this responsibility. And I would even say, if that means you have to put somebody on the court who isn't great with him, you still have to consider it. Or different combinations, I still think you have to find a way, because you can tell how it's working against him at the ends of games on many occasions. And so what he ends up doing is he gets frustrated, and then he just says, all right, I'll retreat, I'll do a fade.
Yep. And
it's a shot I can make maybe 4 out of 10, and I'll take my chances that this will be the one, correct? I mean, and that's, I just don't think that's very useful for this club right now. And there's limited options, I get that, but I really feel that's a big part of what continues to ail the club when it comes to, I mean, we're in almost every game, right? That's the whole point.
Had a million clutch games this year.
Million clutch games, and you win 5 more of them. And obviously you're in a different position. As it is, right now I think we're in the play-in, correct?
Yeah, we're the 7.
We're number 7.
We're a game back of the Clippers, which is also too bad because the Clippers lost yesterday. And again, beating OKC is always going to be a tough putt. It's going to be a tough ask.
Right.
But had you beaten them, you would have slid up and at least been in a tie. I don't know what the percentages would be. Like you'd at least be in that top 6 somehow.
Correct. And as I understand it, right now we're in a meat grinder part of our schedule the rest of the way. But then after we clear this meat grinder part, I believe our schedule is considered like the first or second easiest the rest of the way, which means as you get healthier, there still might be an opportunity to move up in the standings. I'm not, as we bring Johnny into the conversation via the Connecticut Water Systems Hotline, Dayline, Oklahoma City. Johnny, I was just saying, I'm not ruling out the ability to potentially move up in the standings as the schedule gets softer again and as this team gets healthier. But I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to care about any of that if this team does not figure out how to play at the ends of ball games. Because in all honesty, what are we fighting over? What are we obsessing over? What do we care about how much healthier they get if they do not do a better job finishing ball games. And I can't put it all on who's hurt right now because we've seen it pretty much throughout this season. We continually see other teams that seem able to continue to run what they want to run with fewer turnovers down the stretch of games. And that to me is what that's the challenge for Finchie the rest of the way. What do you think?
Yeah, totally, Dan. I mean, that's the existential crisis that is facing this team right now, because if you want to be a human solar panel and if you want to look at the bright side of things, they are literally in every game. Every single game, they never get blown out, except for the one rare occasion here or there, Cleveland, a few others. But they are in every single one of these games. And so, you figure if some things click into place, then you can turn things around, you can get on a run, and you can really have something that's potentially special here. But they do have to figure that out. Now, certainly, I think it will be easier for them to close games when Dante DiVincenzo is healthy. If you have the option of Julius Randle on a good night, I think that helps things for you and all that. But certainly, I think the biggest thing is that Anthony Edwards has to mature and figure out his decision-making process in those times. And Chris Finch is going to have a heck of a challenge figuring out what lineups he needs to play on a certain night. He has not been great at that for much of the season. But yes, that's the big thing facing this team right now.
So, it's interesting because one of the items I got into much earlier in the program is I believe Edwards has too much responsibility right now.
Yeah.
And I don't even think it's fair to him because he's not ready for it. Now maybe someday he will be, and I know some of this is out of necessity, but I have to believe at some point these guys have to get in a room as a group and say, even if we are playing lesser players, even if we are playing players that have some issues, we have to find a way to lessen the burden of having him, to expect him to score late, facilitate late, set everything up late, because I don't think he's ready for it yet.
I agree with you, Dan. I think that it's a double-edged sword here for Ant. Number one is, I don't think from a maturity, understanding the game standpoint, he is there yet in reading what is needed and required in a certain moment there always. When he is knocking down those crazy contested shots, it looks great. Like, that's awesome, super fun, but that's not a repeatable recipe for success. So asking him to do that at this stage of his career seems to be a lot for him. On the other hand, like if you take the Houston game, for example, he took a lot of bad shots, but you know what else happened? There were 3 different times where he drove into the lane, had the defense collapse, made a perfect kick out to a wide-open Jaden McDaniels for 3, or a wide-open Mike Conley for 3, and they missed. And so when he sees that happen over and over again, I understand why he feels like, hey, I'm the best scorer on this team. I got to do this myself. But he does have to do a better job of trusting his teammates. I think they need to get Naz Reid more involved.
Yep.
I do think when Randall comes back, he will help in that regard in terms of veteran decision maker, offensive hub, playmaker guy. But it's been too much for Anthony right now, and part of that is the teammates around him, but part of that is just his development as a player as well.
So, when Gargi and I were talking about this earlier, I talked a lot again about I still feel like relative inability that Edwards has to play off the ball. And I sometimes think the Wolves define, we do that sometimes, as what Gargi brought up, which was Edwards has the ball, passes it to Conley. Conley takes one dribble and passes it right back to him. That's not getting him off the ball. And I'm wondering, is it that he has not mastered, he being Edwards, the craft of playing off screens, of cutting in ways that give him opportunities, either going to the basket or even hitting an open mid-range shot or an outside shot, that's part of the challenge here, is that they want him to do more of that, but that they just don't think he has mastered that. Where is he in that part of his development?
Yeah, I think that is one thing that is lacking in his game right now, is his ability to come off the ball. I'll tell you, I think it was the Houston game again. Naz Reid has the ball on the wing. Edwards cuts to the basket and gets into the paint, and Naz gives him a perfect bounce pass. He catches it and dunks it. And that is the kind of routine play that we see all of the time in regular. Sorry about this. This is Oklahoma City. We're going crazy out
no
here.
Problem.
But that is the kind of routine play that we see in the NBA all the time with star players, that to lighten their load, and so that they don't have to create everything themselves, you get them moving off the ball. Now, there are players that are great at it, like Steph Curry.
Yeah.
There are players that are not as great at it, but Ant is almost non-existent in that area yet. And that's, again, another thing that he can mature at. Right now, basically, their one antidote is what you guys said, is he'll come up with the ball, he'll draw the double, he'll throw it to Conley, and then Conley will throw it right back to him. And that's a way of neutralizing the double team. But that still is then, okay, and it's all on your shoulders. You're one-on-one, you're ISO, make something happen that way. And that's just a hard way to make a living. But right now, he is not polished at all in terms of backdoor cuts, coming off of screens and just getting open catch and shoot jumpers. That's not his game. And that's another thing that he will have to continue to work on this year, next summer, and going forward if he's going to really make the leap from all-star to, the first-team All-NBA type of a player.
Is Rudy, what's Rudy's status for tonight?
So he is out tonight, still has a bad back, a little concerning because he came back from vacation from the All-Star break feeling good. And then in the practice before the Houston game last Thursday, he aggravated it again. And so, generally speaking, back spasms can last a week or 2 weeks, and then you can usually come back and be fine. But I do think it is a little bit concerning that he had it. They kind of went away, and then they came back so quickly. So when he comes back, I'm not exactly sure. Right now, I wouldn't be surprised, Dan, if we saw Julius Randle for sure, and maybe even Dante DiVincenzo before we see Rudy again.
So is the early plan on Randle that we're going to immediately insert him back into the starting lineup, or is it possible they like Naz enough as a starter that they ease him back and justify it on the basis of, well, you're coming off injury, so we're going to try to bring you back slow? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's the major question that I really want to see answered. We haven't talked to Finch about it yet because Randle has not yet been cleared. And so it would be easy for him to just pawn it off and say, we'll deal with it later. But how Chris Finch handles the Randle reacclimation and whether he's in the starting lineup or comes off of the bench, that's going to be critical to them going down the stretch. Right now, Naz Reid is playing at such a high level, and he's doing so many things for them, both at center and at power forward. You can see that Ant feels like he has more room to operate when Naz is out there. He is getting to the line more. He is getting to the paint and the rim more, even if he isn't always making those shots. Those opportunities are coming at a much higher rate for Anthony Edwards, and it's because Naz Reid has been shooting like 40+% from three since January 1st. I mean, he's a knockdown three-point shooter. He creates his own shot, and oh, by the way, he's also rebounding at a high level. He's protecting the rim. He's doing everything you can possibly ask of him. So I will be highly interested to see what they do when Randle is back, because there are some politics that are involved in that.
Yes.
But also there's just an undeniable thing that, hey, things look good with Naz Reid right now.
So I heard Jim Peterson earlier today, who was on Sirius XM, and I think I'm quoting him accurately, that he felt that maybe DiVincenzo, before he got hurt, had become the second most important player to whatever solution, whatever better place the Wolves are trying to get to on the other side. It's been so long since he's been out, I almost have forgotten about him. So refresh my memory on how he was playing before he came back, and what your feeling is regarding his importance, especially as maybe a guy who, at the end of games, can handle the ball some as well, where Ant is not being asked to score and facilitate.
Yeah, I think that when he comes back, and of course there will be an acclimation period after being out for a while, but I think what the Timberwolves are most excited about is really on two fronts for DiVincenzo, because when he was playing and just before he was injured, he had really reached peak DiVincenzo. He had struggled at the start of the season to acclimate himself to this team and figure out find his place. Is he a two guard? Is he a one? Is he coming off the bench? Is he starting? But in those games he was starting prior to the injury, He was making plays for others. He was handling the ball well enough that it wasn't a problem that they didn't have a natural point guard out there with Anthony Edwards in the starting lineup. But he also he is a volume three-point shooter. Like, he gets out there and he jacks them and they go in. And so that dimension breathes space into the offense. He is a guy who looks very comfortable taking clutch shots and making them. He's done it for the Knicks in big situations, whereas you see right now, Dan, with the way things are and the injuries and all those things, Jaden McDaniels has to be a clutch offensive guy. He's just not that. He's had a really nice run here, but they're asking him to do too much from an offensive standpoint. I think DiVincenzo fits into that role much, much better. And the final part of the equation is that DiVincenzo really guards. He is a big one, and he really defends well on the perimeter. And so there is we've seen Mike Conley struggle to defend bigger players, both against Oklahoma City and Houston these last couple of games. And DiVincenzo, I think, stands up to the bigger guards and the bigger perimeter guys much better defensively than Mike Conley does. And so you just have a more dynamic element on both ends of the floor. And I agree with Jim Pete that when he comes back, he's the biggest X factor. We'll see what happens with Randall. We'll see what happens with Rudy, but getting DiVincenzo back and healthy and playing like he was before the injury would be just an enormous lift for these guys down the stretch.
All right, so we've seen several young players have their moments out of necessity, right, because of the injuries. Where does Jalen Clark fit in? Is he healthy enough to go again tonight? And so what's his immediate future and his future when some of these injured players come back? Is there still room for some of the kids?
Yeah. So, first of all, he's listed as questionable tonight. The very notable thing on that is he's listed as questionable with neck pain, which means that he has not been diagnosed with a concussion, which is great.
Oh, that's good. Yeah,
because if you go into the concussion protocol, you're out for several games, and you got to deal with all of that. So I think he's probably going to try to go, depending on how stiff the neck is. But last night, the game fell apart when he went out. He was defending Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at such a great level, making him work, make it hard for him to get to his spots, and just throwing him off, just like he did in the game right before the All-Star break. And on top of it all, he was 6 for 6 from the field, 2 for 2 from three, just really helping offensively. And so he has kind of come out of nowhere in this group of young guys. When you started the season, you probably said you're most excited about Dillingham. You really like what you could have with Shannon. Leonard Miller then actually, and Luka Garza, I think, were both above Jalen Clark on the pecking order. And then Clark has just exploded onto the scene. And so I actually think, Dan, that when all these guys are healthy and back, he actually has the best chance of staying in the rotation of all of the young guys because he has earned Chris Finch's trust from a defensive standpoint. That is the clear key to Chris Finch's heart. And not only has he done that, but he plays a smart offensive game. He doesn't turn the ball over. He makes good decisions. He shoots when he's supposed to. He passes when he's supposed to. And so I think that he is really solidifying himself as not just a big part of what they have right now, but even going into the future over the next few years. They love Jalen Clark and they love what he's bringing, and he's been terrific for them.
You're in Oklahoma City tracking Wolves OKC, the rematch tonight. It's interesting to me. I mean, Oklahoma City, when you watch them, they do seem beautifully put together. Their record is, of course, the best. Just as how they finished, I think, last season, ultimately as well. But for me, there's always this nagging deal of, and I'm not even sure if it's fair to the team, that until they make a sustained playoff run, I'm not going to totally believe that they're as unbeatable as I'm hearing from a lot of the national wonks. So what's your current, how do you size up the Thunder at this point?
Yeah, I think that the questions about them are appropriate until they prove otherwise. That said, in just speaking specifically in this regular season, they are historically good. Their net rating, their defensive efficiency is they're 4.5 points per 100 possessions better than the second place defense, which is the best in 30 years, the biggest gap in 30 years. They are so good from a competitive level, from an execution standpoint. They always get the right shots. Everyone knows their role. They're incredibly well coached. They have everything defined. No one is trying to do more than they are supposed to do. And so from that discipline and that focus standpoint, they're just an incredible monster in the regular season because they always play hard and they always do what they're supposed to do. What will be intriguing in the playoffs is when you get into a series, what if they face LeBron and Luka? Or what if they face Jokic? Like, they're going to run up against people who are battle tested, and until they show that they can break through, you do wonder about, are they too young? Do they have enough? Do they have a true number 2 guy next to Shea to help them if he has a rough night? There are going to be those legitimate questions. That said, they're terrific right now, and I didn't think of that loss last night was anything to be disappointed in. I thought they battled really hard, and they're fantastic. So I do want to see them topple a few dragons in the playoffs first, but they're really, really good, man.
Have fun tonight in Okie City. We will read you tomorrow, and thanks. We'll talk soon.
All right, the gun belt's tight. Thanks, Dan.
Gotta be. Thank you. That is John Krasinski, Jonny Athletic, brought to you by our good friends at RBC Wealth Management. That is RBC Wealth Management, fine sponsor of the Jonny Athletic segment. As I mentioned, we'll about a half hour or so, we'll chat with Nick Halter from Axios, who knows from a business standpoint, downtown Minneapolis about as well as anybody. And he has an interesting proposal that he laid out this morning regarding potentially the site of a new Minnesota Timberwolves arena, if it indeed comes to that. And in addition, when we come back, I mentioned we've got Ode to a Dead Gal. We also have Ode to a Dead Guy. That's coming up. Our next guest wrote earlier today via Axios.com, if Alex Rodriguez and Mark Laurie are serious about building a new basketball arena, picking a high-profile site in the middle of downtown could be a huge win. Nick Halter, kind enough to join us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. Welcome back to the program. For those who have not read the piece that you lay out in a great deal of detail, give us your inspiration and where specifically this site is located.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I have been kind of reporting on the downtown commercial real estate market for a while, and what you're seeing is these office properties trading at prices that are just kind of jaw-droppingly low. And I'll give an example of the Ameriprise Financial Tower in downtown. Sold for $200 million 7 years ago. It just sold for $6 million. So you're seeing some major corrections happening in this market. And so I had been following kind of where the Wolves might build an arena for a while, and I thought, well, a lot of the previous stadium ideas had been on the fringes of downtown near the farmers market, which made sense before because that's where you could find some cheap land. But with what's happening now, I think it might be time to start thinking about looking at something in the middle of downtown that would maybe help kind of revive downtown. And
that location is basically 33 South 6th Street, right? City Center. And that includes a Marriott hotel, our fourth tallest tower. Basically, this footprint stretches from Nicollet Mall to Hennepin Avenue. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a huge complex. It's the tower that people who are sitting at Target Field see. It's kind of the big, ugly, brutalist tower that blocks a lot of the other nice-looking ones. And yes, the tower is 52 stories, and it was it had been the home to Target for a long time. And just a few years ago, they left the tower and consolidated their employees to a couple of buildings nearby, which means it's like mostly dark now. There's a couple of other smaller tenants in there, but as their lease kind of runs out, they're still paying money on it. The value of this tower is just going to keep going down and down and down. And then on the ground floor, people probably know some of the bars and restaurants, Tom's Watch Bar, FEMA's, Fogo de Chão, and some of the Skyway restaurants too.
So the idea here in your mind is, and you talk, and we'll get to this in a bit, there are some hurdles potentially to putting this sort of thing together. But what you lay out, I would think, would certainly interest business leaders, the mayor, as you lay out, talking about the possibility that arena with an entrance on Nicollet Mall and another in Hennepin, which would bring much needed evening and weekend foot traffic to a downtown core that has long been too dependent on office workers. Imagine a Wolves or Lynx playoff game with fans bar hopping on a pedestrian-only Nicollet Mall where open containers are allowed, as Mayor Jacob Fry proposed. And you're saying, look, the price would have been prohibitive at one point, but because of the way the landscape has changed here, it might not be anywhere near as absurd a notion as it was, 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Exactly. I mean, huge discounted prices. And the complication here comes within, buying out people out of their leases, relocating them, tearing their buildings down, that type of a thing. But if the kind of shiny object at the end of this is that you now have a sort of activated Nicollet Mall where it's not just Monday, or it's not even Monday through Friday anymore. It's Tuesday through Thursday that people are in the office. And then how do you run a restaurant on Nicollet Mall when your clientele is only coming down for 3 lunches a week? Well, now you got 41 Wolves games, you got 20 Lynx games, you got concerts, Disney on Ice, just things bringing people down there on the weekends and nights. I think that would be a big game changer.
And Target, so they're out of here. They don't operate in this complex anymore, correct?
They don't. They still, the people that work in that building are still assigned to downtown.
Mm-hmm.
They're just in these other towers. They have just a couple blocks south on the mall. They don't need as much space, and that's what's happening is that companies aren't leaving downtown. They're just saying, well, if we had this much space, we can cut it in half because we're not in here that much. And so that's created a 10 million vacant square feet of office space in downtown Minneapolis. And so trying to refill this tower with a million square feet is just, it's not really going to happen anytime soon.
You write also, Ameriprise Financial was the sole tenant in the 960,000 square foot Ameriprise Finance Center. Then in 2022, they decide to consolidate workers to a building it owns nearby, and the building just sold for $6.25 million, or as you lay out, a 97% discount from its 2016 sale price of $200 million. That's just 8-9 years ago. It's crazy.
Yeah, you're basically giving it away at that point. And I mean, if you look at the building, this Ameriprise Financial Center, it's a nice building. It was only built in 2000. It's a classy, good-looking building. But the amount of money you have to invest in these things to sort of outfit them for new tenants, you have to build, fitness centers and lounges, and you have to build out offices inside of them for new companies to come in. It's something that people don't really want to do, and that's why I'm hearing more and more real estate people talking about the idea of tearing down towers instead of trying to retrofit them.
So have you gotten in any of the reporting you've done, A-Rod made it very clear in this very studio, actually, when he joined us last summer, that they're going to want a new arena, and it's going to be privately financed. Now, we never got any to the fine print at all about what does privately financed mean. What do you expect to get in return from either the city or the state? Have you gotten any hints of where they might be thinking, and if they have expressed any interest in the areas that you're talking about here?
Well, Jonny Athletic reported before that they had been looking at the farmers market site, which makes a lot of sense. But the problem with the farmers market site is that it's sort of surrounded by freeways, and you'd have to you can't really get to the North Loop or downtown easily from it. So there's some drawbacks to that site. As far as I know, they haven't looked at the core of downtown. I did a lot of vetting on this when I had this idea. I called a lot of people who would, sort of will be players in this whole thing as it unfolds, and none of them had really thought of that, but almost all of them were intrigued by it. Some of them just straight up said they loved the idea. They haven't vetted it themselves fully yet because there's a lot more that goes into it than just that's a good site. I mean, there are some drawbacks to it. It's a small site.
Yeah.
I know the big thing they want with Target centers, they want a bigger site where they can have more of an entertainment district. And that makes a lot of sense. There are some possibilities for doing that here because they also have their practice facility at a building that is in between where I'm talking about now and then where their current arena is. It's Mayo Clinic Square. They practice in there. You could sort of make that an extension of the arena and then tear down Target Center and make that like the Wolves Entertainment District, where you'd have maybe hotels or restaurants or offices or residential, that type of thing.
Matt, in Rosemount has texted in, and he's pushing back on a couple of fronts with a couple of issues that I think would be good for you to address. He writes today, I worked in 33 South 6th for years, 22nd floor to be exact. There is no way the footprint is large enough to hold an NBA arena. Target employees are no longer there. He also asks, how would this benefit bars and restaurants any more than Target Center's current location does in that regard? So what distinctions would you draw in that regard? And you've already sort of alluded to the footprint issue. Could it well be that they will view that as, despite how good an idea this seems on several levels, as a non-starter?
Yeah, so the site that I'm talking about, City Center, if you add in not just the tower, but the retail complex, the parking, the hotel, that's 4.75 acres. The current City Center is on about 3.4 acres. So it's bigger. It's about, 3% bigger or something like that. So it is bigger, but I agree with his larger point, which is that if they want to do something massive, this would not be the site. I'm raising the idea that there might be other sites here in downtown that you could start looking at as well. Mm-hmm. That would be that. In terms of like the restaurant business and stuff, if you kind of look at what Wolves fans do, a lot of them park in those ABC ramps and go straight into the arena and back out afterwards. Yep. You could still park in those ramps and you could probably still take Skyways over, but you could now have people coming in from the other side of downtown where it's Nicollet Mall. You could have built up more in the middle of the city again. So I don't think people, if you go to Nicollet Mall before a Wolves game, you don't see as many people down there as you do on the other side of downtown.
Yeah, it's a good point. You also mentioned in the piece you wrote some of the challenges that you acknowledge also beyond just the footprint site is the fact that you got the separately owned full service Marriott hotel that was renovated in a major way, I think, in 2020, assessed at $59 million. How does that complication fit in?
Yeah, that's a big one. I mean, the other issue here is Minneapolis hotel occupancies are the lowest in the country right now. They're like 50%. There's probably a case made that we have too many hotels right now in downtown Minneapolis too. But I talked to one kind of real estate expert who wasn't involved with this, but his idea was, well, you could just give the Marriott air rights to your arena. You could build them a hotel on top of your arena as like a relocation type of thing.
So when, the obvious question is going forward, no matter where they end up trying to build a new arena, is what they expect to get from either the city, the Metro Air, any like Metro Council or the state in return, even though they're saying it's going to be privately financed. The assumption is they might have they might be looking for some tax breaks, et cetera. Do you have any sense of what the city and or state might be willing to do, if anything, in that regard? Or are we at a point where literally places, especially like here, are so suspicious of that whole deal, they're saying, we ain't going to give you a dime. This is all, you're going to have to do this start to finish. What do you think?
Well, if you look back at when the soccer team wanted to build their stadium in Minneapolis, the then Mayor Betsy Hodges didn't want to do a deal with them that would basically have given them property tax exemption, so you wouldn't have to pay property taxes on your stadium. That's pretty much standard for most of these arenas and stadiums in the country. Well, they ended up leaving and going to St. Paul instead, but the current mayor, Jacob Fry, criticized her for that. And so I think, between the lines, he'd be on board with like that idea of giving them property tax exemptions. Now, it's a pretty progressive city council, and that's where I'd have questions about whether or not they would want to, be giving any kind of breaks to a billionaire or billionaires for this kind of a thing. The other thing that I think, and I'm not going to weigh in on who should do what or not, but you could see a deal where if they gave them the old Target Center site as some kind of development opportunity as a flip, making, and then you could build up a tax base on that property over time, because you don't want to just leave that big empty lot there after you tear down Target Center.
No, I would think not. You mentioned, so our hotel occupancy is the lowest in the country of any metro area. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. Yes.
What's that about?
We do well in the summers, but we haven't rebounded the same way as other cities have. Post-pandemic. So this is all still post-pandemic stuff. We've not. What makes us different in that regard? Any theories on why? I think a few things. I mean, one is that we actually had a hotel boom that happened right before the pandemic hit. So like we probably had built out too many rooms in the first place. So like it's kind of then when you just see, and then I think the other big thing here is corporate travel hasn't come back. And for our downtown, where Target hasn't brought people back into the office in any meaningful way, a lot of people flew in to do business with Target, and when they're not in the office, I think a lot of that is missing still. But there could be bigger problems there too. I don't know fully what's going on with it.
A couple more texts have come in. This is from Dan, Minnesota. Wait a second. Who owns Target Center in the land? Does Glenn own it, or does the city state? Just wondering, because I feel like that would affect them being able to turn that into an entertainment district. Sorry, he writes, if that's a dumb question.
No, that's a good question. The city owns it, and that's not always the case. There are places where the teams own stadiums, but the city does own that land and the stadium.
Do you think there's any chance that they would end up entertaining, they being, Mark Lowry and A-Rod, if this goes through and they get approved by the NBA Board of Governors, that they would entertain leaving the city entirely?
I think with Detroit moving into the Pistons moving to downtown Detroit, I think every NBA team now is in a city. So if it's a question of like, would they go to the suburbs? I'd have a hard time seeing that just because the NBA seems to be an urban league that wants to have, downtown arenas. The question of like, would they leave the Twin Cities is one way above my pay grade. But,
sure.
But also it does seem like the NBA is more interested in expansion than relocation.
Did you get any, since you wrote the piece I think was posted this morning, did you get any, what kind of reaction have you gotten either, privately maybe from people affiliated with the Wolves or from the business community? Any interesting responses?
Not really from the Wolves, but I got a lot from real estate people downtown, and all of them really like the idea. But all of them acknowledge, like I do, like there are kinks that could come up that I don't know what they are. So there's engineering questions to be had. So I'm not presenting this as like this is is a sure thing. It's just something I think is worth exploring. And even if it's not this site, like I said, like there's more land now in downtown that should be in play. There's still parking lots. There's still other older buildings that could make sense if you kind of cobble some land together. And
this gets all back to how much the prices have come down regarding these huge pieces of real estate, right? That's the issue. That's why you're saying it's once upon a time it would have been clearly impractical. Now maybe not so much.
Yeah, exactly. And also I think the city, if they have some power in this, should also be thinking that the same way, which is, this is the area that needs it. We don't need to be trying to expand the downtown footprint out towards, up past Target Field, basically. Like the middle of the downtown is what needs it the most. I
appreciate the time, sir. Interesting piece, good fodder, and we'll stay in touch. Thanks as always, Nick.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Absolutely. That is Nick Halter. Writes for Axios, runs Axios local these days, and had a very interesting piece. If you've not read it, maybe we can post it, or I'll retweet the link that Guardsy sent to me, because I had not seen it earlier today. He brought it to my attention, and it does throw in. Look, there's a lot of hurdles in this particular spot, but I think it's a good piece to get people thinking in a different direction. I think that's a lot of what Halter's intent was here, as he just said, is, all right, maybe this is an impractical spot. Maybe this footprint isn't big enough, but that there are, for creative minds, there are some interesting possibilities that because of the real estate market basically imploding to the degree that it has, might open the door to several locations. All of them having hurdles because many of them have they have buildings on there, or even businesses, or in the case of this one location, the Marriott, for example, but renovated Marriott not that long ago. But I do think it's worth pursuing because we're in a different time. And, I'm assuming if you're A-Rod and Lori, you're looking for creativity, right? You're looking for ideas where maybe you bring the city along, perhaps because this mayor is going to be a little bit more receptive to helping out in certain ways if he can be convinced that this can open some other things up in a downtown location that's relatively underserved.
You know what, in 2025, Dan, we call what Nick Halter did today?
Collaborative?
It's a thought exercise.
Is that what they call it
It's
now?
a thought exercise. I think so. That's probably a dated term, but you know me, we're years past the collaboration and alignment and intentionality. But I do like that let's start thinking about it, and let's start thinking about it in a different way. And I thought it was interesting that he said he talked to some people who are going to be players in this thing, and they thought, we never thought of that. That's interesting. That's a good way to think about it. Because whenever we go do the show from the cage, I usually go get some coffee at Cardigan Donuts just across the Skyway, in that city center. Right. And obviously you lived downtown, you worked downtown for a long time. I remember going, I think my dad's office was in the city center back in the day, or at least close by. I remember what it was back in the heyday, 30 years ago, 35 years ago, whenever it was. It ain't that anymore. For people, like I always say with Williams Arena, have you been there lately? If you go to City Center now, it's crazy. What's not there, the lack of activity, and there's obviously places that are hanging on and still good tenants there, obviously. But because of how much stuff has changed for a million different reasons, that does make a lot of sense to try to find some buildings or some lots of land that aren't being used and try to develop those for something like this.
Yeah. Well,
so I like the thought exercise.
Yeah, I think it at least opens some eyes, and it opens the door to some of these possibilities. And look, there's not any question they want a new one, right?
Yes. Yep.
How that's going to play out, they may already have a bunch of ideas. My guess is they do. How much of them are workable, I don't know yet, but they've had plenty of time to think about this stuff, and I don't think I don't think there's any reason to believe they're going to work slow. I think they're going to work big and rather ambitious. And
Laurie's trying to build his own city, Tolosa.
Yeah. What's the latest? I have not heard much on that.
I haven't heard much.
Down,
I think he's focusing on Wonder, his other entity. But that's how these guys think. Certainly Laurie, right? They do think big, and they do think bold, and they do think differently, probably. So I think aggressive is the right word for it.
This is Ed in St. Paul. The Pioneer Press reported that the east side of the Mall of America was a potential arena site. I had not heard that one. Have you read that story?
Well, there's two things. Well, one thing.
Yeah.
I guess one question. Is it the Pioneer Press or is it Charlie Walters in the Pioneer Press?
That's a good question.
And that's not a criticism.
But
I'm just saying things get thrown out.
Yes, they do.
That may or may not be true.
Often are just amused.
Or something that was overheard at Mancini's or Dunker's or something like that. So that's, I think, an important distinction.
Yes, it is.
Is it reported historically, or was it just a thought? Mm-hmm. Hey, some people think the Mall of America site, where they used to have concerts back in the day. Do you remember that? They always do something in that east parking lot.
I don't remember that.
They used to do. I saw James Taylor there. They had a whole concert series in the 90s. I think they put a Cirque du Soleil show in that parking lot. There's plenty of spots there. So we've always been trying to develop that part of Mall of America. I hadn't heard the stadium specifically. Or the arena specifically.
Would the Wolves consider building a facility in Arden Hills like the Vikings have built in Egan?
Who is going to be the Arlington Heights / Arden Hills leverage play?
That's a good question.
Because there's going to be somebody.
Somebody's going to have to get used.
So who's going to be that city?
Apple Valley?
Well, they're still digging out of the snowstorm from 2 years ago. They're not ready for this.
Yeah. That's a good point. Dan, sorry if this is a dumb question, but what is wrong with Target Center? It's already downtown. It's not a dumb question. It does seem illogical to say we need another one. But look, you're not, it's an insane proposition under the old rules, which is having a state, city help out basically to build it and to spend the money to build it. But it's no longer insane with the relatively new model, which we've seen play out in a number of cities in which they have been largely privately funded, that there's not even an attempt to try to hold up a town or to say, well, we got to get 50-50 on this sort of thing. There's only one team in town that could pull that off with a straight face, and that's the Vikings. They already did it. Right?
And they had Pat Kessler also doing a lot of their heavy
water
lifting.
For sure.
Yes.
For a number of years. That part's true, too. So I'm not a great economic mind, so I don't understand how this works when you say privately funded and how owners make money on those kinds of deals. But obviously, wasn't the one in San Francisco, is that Pinnacle? What's that called? The one that Golden State plays in?
The Chase Center?
Oracle?
It was the Oracle.
Oh, now it's a Chase. Okay,
I
is that
think
what
it's the Chase Center now.
That was privately funded, right?
I don't know for sure, but I would think yes.
Now I think like the cheapest ticket price for an average game is like $800.
Yes.
So maybe that's how they the owners have made it up, being in charge of the financing.
Right.
But I assume it's complicated. It has to do with sponsorships, and there's got to be a lot of ways that they find a way to make money.
Intuit Dome, with your guy Steve Ballmer, the Clippers' new place. He paid for that, if I remember correctly.
So Charlie Walters is an early adopter of thought exercise. Yes, that's a good way to put it.
He may have cornered the market on it.
That's a very, very good
and
way.
some of it comes true, but he does do a good job of getting the conversation going.
Gargi, didn't you go to the giant inflatable fest meat grinder in the East MOA lot? And by the way, some of us call that the Met Center lot. I have no recollection of this stuff.
Well, I thought IKEA was the Met Center lot.
Oh, yeah.
I thought IKEA was where Met Center was.
Yeah, technically, I think you're right, but I think that's true.
I could be wrong, but the inflatable thing, no. Like the Big Bounce America thing, I don't remember that.
I don't have any recollection of any of this, man. My memory is just
They had a whole concert series there, like 95, 96. I remember being in middle school and going.
Hey, and we don't want a new X, but don't we want a bunch of change, like remodeling there too?
Yeah, including maybe a hotel connected to it.
And where's the money on that?
That I don't know.
Yeah.
But Bettman went to bat for us when he was in town a few weeks ago. Yeah, saying that we need to get it done.
Well, but I mean, I still don't know where you're going to get
St. Paul, Melvin Carter.
Maybe.
Come on down.
Yeah, if they have the finances.
Teams
to do
moved. We've lost a team before.
I guess that's true.
Lost even the state of hockey has lost a hockey team before.
Top 5 at 5 will include
a little bit of Wolves. What was your favorite tush-push moment? And I know you covered this on Sunday sermons. What was your favorite Ishbia brother, speaking of owners, buying the Twins? And what does A.J. Przynski think about the new developments?
Schwab Trading is now powered by Ameritrade to give you a new, elevated trading experience tailor-made for trader minds. Go deeper with Thinkorswim, the powerful award-winning trading platforms now at Schwab. Unlock support from the trade desk, our team of passionate traders who live and breathe trading like you do. And sharpen your skills with an expanding library of online education crafted just for traders. All designed to help you trade brilliantly. Learn more at schwab.com/trading.
Texter Ryan recalls that the Vikings had 2 consecutive failed tush pushes against the Bengals in 2023 when the smallest guy on the team, Brandon Powell, tried pushing Nick Mullins. I do have some vague recollection of that there was some muttering and frustration that only we would end up using the smallest person at the back of the tush push. And I think that wasn't this past year. I think it was the year before. I don't think we did a tush push in 24.
No, and that does jog my memory because the other weird thing about the Nick Mullins tush push is he somehow threw an interception on the play, which had never happened
before. That true?
No.
Oh, I believed it, actually. It wouldn't surprise me. That's a Nick Mullins cheap shot.
He somehow threw an interception on the play.
Yeah, well, there are fake tush pushes.
There are.
That has been done, to be honest with you. I think the Eagles have done it, haven't they, with some success?
Probably.
Because the Eagles are the team we always assume they're going to actually do the tush push.
There's a lot of things you can do off of it.
Yeah.
In the memorable Black Friday Gopher victory against the Wisconsin Badgers, they faked the tush push and then did like an end around.
Correct.
To Marcus Major, and he took it like 40 yards down to like the 10.
Yes, that's
you line them all up, and people have thrown out of it. There's a lot of different things. The tush push is not just the one play. There's these offensive minds now, especially in the NFL with their BMI. There's a lot of different things they can do with the tush push.
I've got a lot of miscellaneous stuff to try to work in the rest of today's program, including a question for you regarding. I just shake my head sometimes at some of the stuff that gets written. But anyway, we had Jack McCallum on yesterday. Jack McCallum, Hall of Fame sports writer. He's written on everything, but he's basically most known for writing about the National Basketball Association. And he wrote the ultimate book probably on the Dream Team, the team of NBA players who were given the task of, reminding the world that we're still the best in basketball back when our amateurs were not consistently coming away with gold medals.
The team that changed everything.
1992 Barcelona team. That's exactly it. And there's just when you thought there was really nothing new under the sun to say or do regarding that team, HBO comes out with a new documentary that just came out within the last week that I stumbled upon. I wasn't even prepared to do anything with it. Had mild interest, and then I happened upon it, and then I couldn't stop watching it. I thought it was very well done, and it's called We Beat the Dream Team. And it's the story of the select team of college players, college stars, that would have represented the U.S. in 92 in Barcelona if there had not been this switch over to the pro teams. And it tells a story that people have kind of known about, but I don't think it has been updated or told in quite the way that it is in this particular documentary. And in this case, members of that select team are interviewed about the time they beat the Dream Team. And it was very early in Dream Team training camp. Not surprising that it would be in posh and Tony La Jolla, California.
Sounds nice.
And on either day 2 or 3, there's a scrimmage that takes place, full court scrimmage, between the Dream Teamers and this select team, which included names like Grant Hill, Chris Webber,
Jamal
Mashburn,
Bobby
Allen
Hurley.
Houston, Bobby Hurley, etc. And as they lay out the story, by the end of said scrimmage, the select team has outscored the Dream Team. They're keeping score. It's up on the scoreboard. And the debate that has broken out since, as laid out nicely in this piece, is in the documentary, is whether the select team actually beat them, or whether the master psychologist, head coach of the Dream Team, Chuck Daly, orchestrated all of it. That he knew that his team was close to unbeatable, but the one thing he wanted to establish early was the obvious, that we don't want you getting fat. We want you to get maybe a little bit annoyed by something that might take place early in this thing. And what would annoy you more than these kids, these snot-nosed kids, knocking you off? And, of course, the Dream Team includes Michael and Magic and Larry, and David Robinson. Go through the names, the biggest names that you could possibly. Scottie Pippen, not Isaiah Thomas.
Karl Malone, John Stockton.
Go down the list.
Yep.
Right.
Christian Laettner.
And Christian Laettner. So what I found, have you seen it yet?
No.
Okay. I think you'd enjoy it.
Yes, I will. It's on the list. I was watching the new, what was I watching? Oh, the Olympic documentary that just came out about last summer's basketball Olympics. Fully Embedded USA, France.
Right, I have not seen that yet.
So I was pulling that up, but I saw the Dream Team one, and it's definitely on the list.
I had not known it was coming. I had not heard much advance notice about it at all. And what is fascinating is the recollections of the participants, both the college kids and the Dream Teamers as well. And the one individual, and I talked about this with Jack McCallum, the one individual who seems most adamant about believing that these kids can think that they knocked off the Dream Team, fine. If it makes you feel better about yourself, it's wonderful, but it's a pipe dream. It's Santa Claus. It's a made up story. It's cute. But at some point you have to grow up and realize that game was thrown. That's the term that Mike Krzyzewski used. He said Chuck Daly threw the game. And he's the only individual, interestingly, in either group who goes that far.
Coach K.
PJ Carlissimo says, look, is it possible Daly being Daly as it's going on and he's seeing our struggles, decided to not jump in as much as he could have in terms of timeouts or substitutions or whatever, that he maybe had happened upon something that, hey, this might have a good purpose for me right here. PJ says, yeah, I think that's possible. But he does not even agree with Krzyzewski that it was literally thrown. Interestingly, the NBA, it's not surprising that the kids say we beat them. I don't care what anybody says. We beat them fair and square. Yeah, apparently Jordan didn't play as much as some other players, but their point is, well, even if he didn't, I mean, look at all the players you had on that team. But they say we won that game fair and square. More telling, perhaps, to me is that a number of the Dream Teamers said they kicked our ass. That's what they did. Barkley said it. Magic said it. Michael said it. Said, look, I understand the mind games thing. I understand that's how Chuck operated. I came from Phil Jackson. I'm accustomed to that sort of thing. But he said, hey, we were bored that day. We weren't into it enough. We weren't taking it seriously enough.
MJ probably played 36 before it.
No, that's probably true.
Yep.
And smoked a few stogies, and we got our butt handed to it. But what McCallum believes Krzyzewski's wrong. As a guy who was there, he remembers walking into the gym after that scrimmage because he's there. He did note what is noted in the documentary. The score had been taken down. It no longer said, I think it was the kids won by like 52-48 or 54-52, something like that. The score was missing. He did note that at the time that a lot, but they at that point didn't really realize anything momentous, if you want to call it momentous, had happened. It's early in training camp. It's the second practice, whatever the case may be. But in all of his conversations with people about this over the years, he thinks Coach K is making it up. And for whatever reason, almost to the point of cruelty. I mean, most of the conversation, even though there's an edge, is affable. And we're playing back and forth.
What are the
beat your
stakes?
ass. Exactly it. But Coach K is just, he sits down with Grant Hill and is just vicious. And Hill, being as magnanimous as he is, kind of takes it.
Very nice guy.
And doesn't want to fire back. But it's everyone else, I think, tried very hard to be magnanimous to the point where the rematch it's also covered in the documentary. The rematch the next day, they play each other again. And I don't want to give away the whole story for those who do want to, enjoy the moment and looking back on it. Let's just say it went very differently the second day.
Sure.
But what I like is, once again, there was acknowledgement of that on the part of the Chris Webbers, the Mashburns, et cetera. It wasn't like they pretended, okay, maybe they got a little bit of the better of us. Everybody, other than Coach K, I thought was pretty honest about their emotions and their feelings, and also about giving credit to the other party in this particular case.
So how did Coach K allege that the game was thrown? Did he give examples of how, or did he just say we threw it? He
didn't. I guess as specific as he got is that Jordan didn't play the number of minutes he usually would.
So load management.
So some load management, no timeouts called when he could have done certain things. Because one of the things that McCallum did mention is, if you want to believe that it wasn't necessarily thrown, but that Daly was using it, it was that at no point does anybody remember him putting Pippen or Jordan on Hurley. Bobby Hurley was the player.
Yeah.
Hurley was kind of the straw that stirred the drink in that game. He got into every crevice. And basically he was matched up against Magic. And Magic was not a great one-on-one defender, especially by that point in his career.
And Hurley was a dog. People don't remember that.
Hurley was a dog. He was healthy then. He was a damn good player.
Yep.
And so he kept breaking down the defense and creating open dunks and open looks for other people. So I guess if you want to buy the Daly part, that if he really wanted to shut it down, Scotty, take him out of the game.
Right.
Just take him out. Or Michael, take him out. And that matchup rarely existed in the game. Now, there's no box score of that game, I don't believe, that's ever been done, which would be interesting if indeed there was, in terms of actually the number of minutes, whatever. But it's a nice little slice of a story that I think everybody thought, well, there's not much left to know about the Dream Team. But it did raise, I think, very interesting questions. And there are good highlights of both games, both scrimmages that took place as well. And it is interesting to remember that the assumption is Daly ordered that the score be taken down so there'd be no discussion about what had taken place on that particular occasion.
Probably smart.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a story, I don't know if it's covered in this, but wasn't there a story that Weber did peacock a little bit at the hotel or something. I thought
there was some. They said that the
after.
veterans said there was some peacocking during the game too.
Yeah, and I remember
during the scrimmage.
Larry Bird limping to his hotel room, basically saying, "We'll see you tomorrow." One of those things.
Right,
like, okay, young, but because they were obviously,
Right.
I'm sure the kids thought, "What the hell just happened?
Right.
This is unbelievable." It's interesting that of the Dream Team, because we all know what happened. They went and crushed everybody,
Yes.
including Tony Kukoc. I know McCallum and you talked about that. We talked about it. That was part of the Last Dance bit too, of how Pippen and Jordan just eviscerated poor Tony Kukoc, who later became an important player on their title teams. But it's interesting that the two big stories, besides just what happened in Barcelona, are that scrimmage and the scrimmage they had against themselves.
That's correct.
Where Jordan and Magic went into it.
Yeah,
And we knew
that was in Monte Carlo, I think.
Yeah, the two stories, just scrimmages, can have so much lore associated with them, I think is phenomenal.
And McCallum told me Sunday he did have, and that interview is available where? Where do people find it if they want to? Did you say you put it in a special spot?
Just on the Bumper to Bumper Dan Barreiro podcast page. It's isolated as a conversation.
Yeah.
So if you're a subscriber, if you've rated us, if you are following the Bumper to Bumper Show podcast channel, it's right there for you.
Yeah, no question about that.
Labeled as a conversation.
It was a good one beyond that particular subject. He's a good interview, as you know. McCallum is just a very good guest, and he's plugged in as pretty much anybody. Where was I going to go? I had something else about
the scrimmages. What
McCallum said that he actually hired somebody to look at the video of the Monaco scrimmage or Monte Carlo one, wherever it was, to get a box score out of that game. So he was able to collect I think it might have been in the book that he wrote. I'm not exactly sure.
I love it.
But yeah, it was pretty good stuff. In any case, if you're interested, it is available to you if you missed it yesterday. And sometimes, Sunday audience is nice, but it's a little bit smaller. And that's why I wanted to mention it again today and give people a little bit of background into the story as well.
You mentioned the Kevin Durant stuff, how they're probably going to have to trade him.
Yes.
So I watched the first episode of, and I talked about this last week on Thursday when you were gone. I watched on my way to Purdue the first episode of, I think, 6 that they did about the 2024 Olympics. And it's really good stuff. Everybody's embedded. You've got Serbia, you've got Canada, you've got France, obviously, and then the United States in the Olympics and the build-up. And I'm only one episode in, but I left that episode obsessed with getting Kevin Durant on the Timberwolves.
Yeah, that happens.
Even at his advanced age, and all, because he's still good.
He is good. His numbers are still good.
Who knows if they'll be able to pull it off, and who knows if it would even work. But I just love everything about how he talks, how he thinks, how he sees things. I haven't gotten to the point where he cries yet, but they basically did the Michael Jordan thing, the Jordan doc bit, where they're showing videos or at least alluding to the fact that France is coming for you. Like, France thinks they're going to beat you. Canada thinks they're going to beat you.
Right.
This is what they're saying. They're saying, well, it's funny. America had to bring their A players to beat us. And Durant's like, well, yeah, you guys get to do that. Okay. Well, yeah, let's strap in. Let's see. Like, I guess we'll find out.
Yeah.
Like, I was just obsessed with KD after that.
Well,
and now I got to get back to it.
I think, you're running a risk with him because he's getting older, obviously. He's not a great defender at this point, but he keeps himself in great shape. And I believe in the notion that he'd be energized wherever he goes next if it's a contending team, right? Whether it's here or someplace else, a team where at least on paper, he's back for having a chance to make a little bit of a run. He's got to right now miss that terribly because Phoenix is irrelevant, right? The Suns are playing out the string this season. They're not a factor the rest of the way. And you look at his numbers. The numbers he's putting up are still pretty incredible given his age in terms of shooting, scoring, etc. So it may well be a pipe dream. There's a number of variables to that, but what's changed is he's going to be traded. No one doubts it at this point because they're boxed in to the degree they are. And so they'll almost be forced to do it.
I think you'd get a better Ant too. I mean, if you bring his guy, I think you'd get a better version of Anthony Edwards,
I think that's
too.
possible.
I think he would be, in a weird way, energized in a weird way.
Well, you certainly are back to having a number two in a way that you don't have since Towns left, and with the people you're trying to replace him with, even if they end up being helpful players in the case of Randall and DiVincenzo. This story, I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on this, but, well, two other things. One is NBA related. One is college basketball related. So I'm looking at a headline. I mean, Gophers feel the pressure when they're favored to win. I mean, and what they're talking about, obviously, is they have this great trip to California. They become only the second team so far, at least I think, to sweep USC and UCLA. And they come back here and they lay an egg against Penn State, right? And they had previously gotten on a roll, and then didn't they lose to Washington here
at home
as well?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, you can't. I don't know how you sell this stuff with a straight face. They haven't done nearly enough good for me to go with. That's the oldest angle in the book, right? It's, oh, you can't stand prosperity. You know what? We need to be the underdog. When people think we got a little pressure on us, we can't handle it. Come on. It's so simplistic, a line of thinking and logic, and I don't believe it. And I would say, in all honesty, even if I did believe it, if I'm associated with the Gophers, I'm not uttering it out loud because not enough good has happened where you can really, even with a straight face, go down that road. Just say we're inconsistent, or we didn't take care of this business, or Dawson Garcia had an off game, or whatever the case may be. But this idea of, well, you know, we're fine if we're favored to lose by 9, but if we're favored to win by 4, come on, not enough has happened. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Buckets. It's already happened.
Yeah.
It's already happened. It's taken 5 games for most people to forget everything about Jimmy Butler. And I guess that's the nature of sports. It's no matter how badly it ended in Miami, no matter how unprofessionally Jimmy Butler behaved again to get out of Miami. He gets on a basketball court, plays off of one of the all-time greats in Steph Curry pretty well, very well thus far. And I think they're 4-1, either 4-1 and 5 or 5-1 since Butler came aboard. And it's like all's forgiven, right? All is forgotten. It's now what are we back to? This buckets is dangerous.
Yep. Playoff Jimmy.
Golden State's dangerous. Steph's got somebody to play off of a little bit who plays a little differently than he does, right? Gives the Warriors offense a slightly different look than just a jump shooting kind of approach. Hell, Draymond has already flatly predicted they're going to win the title.
Is that right?
Yes, he actually said that publicly, either at a podcast or after a game. I'm not sure which. So, look, the league has always been more interesting with Jimmy Butler in it. There's no question about that. That's undeniable. But it is what's taken place in this short period of time, because they haven't really won anything. But what's already happened enough, there's been enough progress made that it's like we've got amnesia, and Buckets is a hero again, and none of that stuff needs to be brought up anymore. And I'm thinking to myself, shouldn't we make him have to do a little more than this, even if he's been good? Shouldn't it be more than winning, 4 out of 5 regular season games? I don't even know who they've played that's any good. Maybe 1 or 2 decent teams, I'm not sure. Shouldn't we be a little tougher, a little more resistant?
We're not, though,
to the Buckets seduction,
and especially NBA media is not.
No, that's true,
because they never care after a player opts out or demands a trade or just decides I'm not going to play.
Correct.
They talk about it, and people get loud about it, and then they come back. Like you've always said, the players have the last word. If you come in and perform, then everybody forgets everything. Who didn't see that coming, though, by the way? Like the second that deal was made, everybody said, look out for Buckets.
Yeah,
who knows if it's going to go anywhere, but he's going to be ready. He's going to be engaged. He's probably going to give out his number.
He's always better on the way in than he is on the way out.
Totally. We all know the Jimmy Butler business.
Yeah, for sure.
It's going to be, we'll see how this one spectacularly implodes in a few years. Because it's inevitable, right?
Dr. Phil writes, Dan, would you say the Jimmy Butler with the backup scrimmage was a dream team scrimmage equivalent? That's well played. Remember that?
I do. What I remember about it is, because Jeff Teague, now speaking of podcasts, we played it.
Oh, yeah.
Jeff Teague basically, he just thought the whole thing was funny.
Yes,
I'm like, that just tells you everything you need to know about Jeff Teague.
That's true.
And he also said, did we ever play when Teague didn't think he was coming to Minnesota, and then his agent basically said, well, this is your best contract. So he was bitter the whole time.
Yeah.
Just like, of course, not surprising.
We learn when our worst fears are confirmed, it's never good, right? Because all it does is keep us paranoid for the next time, right? The assumption that there are people laughing at us or they don't want to be here, correct?
And Teague straight up said it.
Wait till they get to that new arena. They'll all want to come to the new state-of-the-art arena.
The City Center Arena?
Yeah, whatever we'll call it. I'm guessing it'll be sponsored.
But by who? I mean, Target's like...
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe Target just keeps going with it.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's possible.
But Target's shrinking their influence here in the Twin Cities.
Very, very hard to say. We got some other texts that I want to get into. I had one other... I have a football subject I want to explore with you as well. It's Combine Week, correct?
It is. Everybody's in Indy.
Yeah, directly related to Combine, but it's almost like hot stove league chatter regarding the National Football League and your favorite team.
Save on your next oil change at O'Reilly Auto Parts. Choose Castrol Edge Full Synthetic Motor Oil to provide maximum performance and protection for your engine. Get a $15 gift card after rebate when you buy 5 quarts of Castrol Edge for $34.95. Plus 2 times O Rewards points. Offer valid in-store and online at O'ReillyAuto.com.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.